The Shining is the story of a man who desperately wants to be trapped inside his own mind. Especially in the age of people with amateur status being able to create practically anything, compared to 30 years ago when common people didn't have things like professional art software, video editors, and coding software. Everyone has their own passion project of some sort. Whether it's writing the screenplay to a full-length movie, or starting a music career, or writing a book, or even something as small as this video essay, everyone has their own dreams that can be much more easily brought to reality thanks to modern technology. But there still exists a very big problem that can get in the way of the creation of art: the repetitive cycle of day-to-day life. Jack Torrance is a man who has grown tired of his responsibilities getting in the way of his own ability to intellectually think. Despite that he desperately tries to tell himself otherwise, he has grown to hate his job as a school teacher, as well as the restrictions that come with being a husband and father. He is tired of his mind being clogged by monotonous things such as groceries and taxes and work, and decides to become the caretaker of the Overlook Hotel as the way of having more time to himself to work on things that he enjoys, such as writing. Though despite that he has these very relatable traits, at least to me personally, that's not to say that he isn't a terrible person. He has an alcohol problem. He regularly lashes out at his wife, and he awkwardly tries to connect with his son to little to no success. But easily his greatest flaw is his belief that he's the only one capable of shining. The act of shining, as described by Dick Halloran, is the ability to speak to and be spoken to by other people who can also shine without ever opening your or their mouth. It's not as simple as that though. As he puts it, not only are people capable of shining, but so are places. People can sense things that haven't happened yet, and people can sense things that have happened a long, long time ago. My interpretation of what Halloran described is that shining is both inputting and outputting knowledge in a connecting stream that reacts accordingly. Jack, Dick, Danny, and the Overlook Hotel itself, whether they're aware of each other's ability to shine or not, are all part of the stream. It is demonstrated in the film that Wendy does not have this ability multiple times. During the scene where Jack and his family are driving to the Overlook Hotel during closing day, you can tell merely by the look on his face that he would much rather be driving alone like he was at the beginning of the film. Wendy is very clearly completely unaware of this as she attempts to strike up a conversation.
Boy, we must really be high up. The air feels so different.
If she could shine, she would have recognized that Jack would prefer to have his thoughts uninterrupted and drive in peace. This is immediately followed up by another example of them not being on the same subconscious frequency. When Danny tells Jack that he's hungry, Jack tells him that he should have eaten his breakfast and that he'll have to go hungry for the rest of the ride. Meanwhile, Wendy worries less about Danny's inability to feed himself and tells him that she'll get him something to eat as soon as they get there. If Wendy could shine, she would also be concerned with Danny's eating problems like Jack is.
Dad,
Yes?
I'm hungry.
Well, you should have eaten your breakfast.
We'll get you something as soon as we get to the hotel, okay?
Okay, Mom.
This is then immediately followed up by another example. When Wendy finally brings up something interesting that results in Jack coming out of his psychological shell, Wendy almost immediately shuts him back down again out of the fear that the subject of cannibalism would hurt Danny's innocence.
Hey, wasn't it around here that the Donner Party got snowbound?
I think that was farther west in the Sierras.
What was the Donner Party?
They were a party of settlers in covered wagon times. They got snowbound one winter in the mountains. They had to resort to cannibalism in order to stay alive.
You mean they ate each other up?
They had to, in order to survive.
Jack.
Don't worry, Mom. I know all about cannibalism. I saw it on TV.
See? It's okay. You saw it on the television.
If Wendy could shine, she would have inferred that Danny knows about the more gruesome topics like cannibalism thanks to television. The list of examples of Wendy visibly not having the shining goes on, and I only chose these 3 examples because they take place literally seconds apart from each other, back to back, all in the same shot. There is one more example that I would like to bring up, because it is easily the greatest example in the entire film. The scene where Wendy walks into the main room where Jack is typing and breaks his concentration, only to ask him a series of useless questions that one would only ask another when they're completely famished of social interaction and not when they're in the middle of doing something they're passionate about. I want to dedicate a portion of this video to this scene in particular, how well it explains Jack's emotional state and his anger toward his family. One of my most favorite things about this scene is how the score reacts to Wendy's presence. At the beginning of the shot, we see Jack sitting alone in his room. We can tell by the rapid clacking of his typewriter, as well as the mystical sound of the score, that he is in a very deep state of concentration, which is very fragile and easy to break. When Wendy comes into the room, we hear the score go from mystical to more of a sense of uprising frustration. Wendy is posed as the threat to Jack's concentration, slowly looming closer and closer until the chances that maybe she's simply walking to the next room is impossible. When she says, "Hi, hun," the mystical instruments of the score completely disappear as he's left with purely the frustration that his concentration has been broken. Finally, he tears the page, lets go of whatever concentration he has left, and the score ends with a sudden halt.
How's it going?
Fine.
Get a lot written today?
Yes.
We've all been in a situation like this, no matter what it is that we were doing. When we get interrupted, it can be very difficult to even remember what we were thinking before the train of thought came to a sudden halt. Jack sees Wendy and the questions that she asks him as a chore. Her mere presence in the room feels like an unskippable cutscene in a video game. It is very clear that if Wendy could shine, she would never even be in the scene at all, and it would have cut straight to Thursday. While I want to address how I feel as if I can relate to the character of Jack Torrance, I also want to state that I'm not trying to be sympathetic towards him. He is, as I mentioned, a terrible person, and the way that he reacts to Wendy breaking his concentration further proves my point.
Wendy, let me explain something to you. Whenever you come in here and interrupt me, you're breaking my concentration. You're distracting me. And it will then take me time to get back to where I was. Understand?
Yeah?
Fine. And we're gonna make a new rule. Whenever I'm in here, you hear me typing. Whether you don't hear me typing, whether the fuck you hear me doing in here, when I'm in here, that means that I am working. That means don't come in. How do you think you can handle that?
Whether we want to admit it though, we all wish that we could react the way he does in the scene when this happens to us. Jack Torrance is, as I like to call it, a catharsis character. Other examples of catharsis characters are Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver, Arthur Fleck from Joker, and Bill Williamson from Rampage. These may seem like incredibly strange comparisons to be making, and to be completely honest, I don't blame you. Mainly because there is one thing that makes Jack, and by extension the movie itself, different from other catharsis characters in movies. It's that normal catharsis movies focus on the anger and frustration of the average human being, but The Shining focuses on the anger and frustration of the artist, and how the daily cycle can not only get in the way of a person's general mood, but also their ability to express themselves artistically. I don't care about myself in comparison to how much I care about my art, and because of that, Average catharsis movies don't necessarily hit home for me the way they do for others, and seeing Jack slowly believe that his family is a threat to his ability to write his book is a very cathartic experience. What book, you might ask? Isn't the book he's been writing just the same sentence over and over and over again? Well, allow me to explain. Remember earlier when I mentioned that Jack, Danny, Dick, and the Overlook building itself are all part of a stream of information that flows to and from all of them, and how they react accordingly? We know from the beginning of the film that Jack is an aspiring author, and as aspiring authors do, he takes experiences and knowledge from other media and real-life events and uses them as inspiration for his book. I believe that by thinking the Overlook is a place where he can be free in his own imagination, he is sharing his ideas and concepts for the book with the Overlook itself, and as I mentioned, it reacted accordingly. When Danny saw the two sisters while he was playing darts, he did not see the ghosts of the Grady twins. What he was seeing was the physical manifestation of one of the concepts for Jack's novel, inspired by the Charles Grady incident. This also happens earlier in the film, when Danny gets the vision of an elevator completely filled with blood. Maybe this was supposed to have been a scene in Jack's novel that accidentally got transferred to Danny's head via The Shining. Jack does not know that his story is literally coming to life in ways that are hurting Wendy, Danny, and Dick. Jack does not know that he is the main character in a movie named after the novel he's writing. His novel called The Shining. And by the time he finally learns that his son is also capable of shining, it's already too late. His concept of reality and fiction have already been so blurred that he believes killing his own family is merely the next chapter of his own story. He has already been so threatened by the idea of having this comfort and isolation taken away from him that he goes so far as to try to murder Wendy, Dick, and Danny, not realizing that Danny would likely become a famous author much like his father thanks to his equally strong imagination, had he chosen less lethal ways of holding on to the Overlook. Everything that Danny and Wendy went through, from the woman in the bathtub, to the elevator, to the room filled with skeletons, to the Grady twins, to room 237, to meeting Grady in the bathroom, to the bear. It was all simply a part of his book, and he gradually becomes more and more consumed by it, to the point that he thinks becoming increasingly irrational won't have consequences, because after all, it's only a story. Or at least he thinks. He never meant to hurt his family, at least not at the beginning of the film. He only wanted to write a novel that was cathartic to him in nature, and the repeated phrase that Wendy read when she finally looked through it was, in a way, the overall theme of the novel, and the overall theme of the movie. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. In the end, even despite that Danny and Wendy had escaped, Jack won. He had fully become one with his own imagination and could never be forced out of it. He can never go back to the real world with his wife and child, to being a school teacher in the early 80s, to being forced to function purely as a cog in the machine. The Shining is a warning to never try to take away the only thing that a true artist cares about: their ability to create.